Shalom, 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 brothers and sisters. This is your brother Kazakya, and we are in Black History Month, and we're doing a presentation talking about the so-called African Americans, blacks, and Negroes, where we came from, and who we are today. Okay, so now, as our base, we're going to go back to Genesis chapter 10. As I said in the previous session, that Genesis chapter 10 is a table of nations. And when you read from the table of nations, it gives you an understanding of who's who in the nations. So we're going to read in Genesis chapter 10, and we're going to read verse 32. Genesis chapter 10, verse 32.
These are the families of the sons of Noah, after their generations in their nations, and by these were the nations divided in the earth after the flood.
So every person, for those of you theologians and scholars that don't teach your members that every person on the face of the earth is a result of one of Noah's three sons after the flood. That's what the text says. That's what the scriptures teach. That's what history proves. And everybody on the face of the earth is a result of one of Noah's three sons. Okay. Now, on the last session, we broke down, we talked about these sons of Noah. We talked about Ham, Shem, and Japheth. And we didn't go into great detail as far as where these sons settled. But what I'm going to do is for you is we're going to read something. First, I want to nip something in the bud very quick, right? That is that there is a popular teaching by a movement called British Israelism, and I think they go under Aryan Israelism or something like that. Anglo-Israelism, that's it. Where they are teaching that the northern tribes of Israel, Manasseh and Ephraim, are the descendants of America and Britain. So I'm going to touch that first, and before we go forward in dealing with, we want to expose the myth, and then we're going to deal with the people, the so-called African Americans, blacks, and show you with infallible proof that you are direct descendants of the biblical Israelites, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Okay. Having said that, what I want to do is I want to read from the book of Jubilees. And for those of you, we have many different reference books. Some people have a issue with this. This is the this is called the Old Testament Pseudepigrapha. Now I took the cover off of it because I just tear books up covers. So so this is how I actually have preserved it. I don't even know where the cover is on this book. But be that as it may, I'm going to read out of the book of Jubilees. And I have a reference to the book of Jubilees chapter 4. So what I want to do is I'm going to go to chapter 4 of the book of Jubilees. And I made reference to Jubilees 4:33, so I'm going to read that, and then we're going to go from there. Okay, Jubilees chapter 4, verse 33, and it reads as follows. It says, "And in the 25th Jubilee, Noah took a wife for himself, and her name was Amzerah." So in the book of Jubilees, one of the things I like about the book of Jubilees is that where King James book of Genesis leaves out names of people and some other details that makes you scratch your head and say, what about this, and what about this, and who's this, and where did this come from, and where did they come from, and what about the wives, right? So book of Jubilees actually gives you the names of the wives. So book of Jubilees, once again, it says, this is chapter 4, verse 33. It says, "And in the 25th Jubilee, Noah took a wife for himself, and her name was Amzerah. she was the daughter of Rachel, the daughter of his father's brother, right? As a wife in the first year, in the 5th week. And in this 3rd year, she bore him Shem, right? So now, according to the book of Jubilees, Shem is the first or the oldest son of Noah, right? And in the 5th year, she bore him Ham, okay, which is the middle son or the second born. And it says, and in the 1st year of the 6th week, she bore for him Japheth, right? So that is the last son or the baby boy, Japheth, right? Now we went over in the previous session what those names mean. Japheth incidentally means expansion, right? Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to deal with Japheth to dispel a myth that the people who came from the British Israel people are supposed to be from Shem. I'm going to read a reference. We're going to come back to the book of Jubilees, but I'm going to read read a reference book, and it's going to give us some information. This book that I'm going to read from is called the Ancient History, right? The Ancient History, or History of Ancient Egypt. It's called the History of Ancient Egypt by, it's edited by Professor Charles F. Kent, PhD of Yale University. This book actually was done. It was a series. This book was a series called the Historical Series for Bible Students, right? It was edited by Professor Charles F. Kent, PhD of Yale University. So now we're talking about Yale University, and this is a Gentile accredited university, one of the highest in the land of this America, United States. So we know it's right. Okay. It was also edited by Professor Frank K. Sanders, PhD, and he was formerly of Yale University. Okay. The book is volume 5, right? I'm giving you the reference so you can look it up. You can Google it on the internet and you can read this book. Volume 5, and the book is entitled A History of Ancient Egyptians, right? A History of Ancient Egyptians. And the book was copywritten in 1905, and it was published in May of 1908. So that was before 1948, when the so-called Jews, who were supposed to be the descendants of Israel, went back home. Okay. This book was published in 1908 and approved by Yale University. I will be reading from page, I have an actual electronic copy of the book. It's one of the rare books that may not be in print any longer. Okay, I'm reading from page 212 on my PDF. Okay, it is actually page 237, right, on the actual book itself. I think it's page 237, and it's under the heading of the Empire, under the Empire First Period. Okay, under the paragraph number 203, and it reads as follows. It says, other non-Semitic peoples were also beginning to appear on Egypt's northern horizon. A group of warriors of Iran, okay? A group of warriors from Iran, okay? Follow me now. Now appeared for the first time in history, had by 1500 BC pushed westward to the upper Euphrates and established an Aryan dynasty. Okay, so it says 1500 BC, they pushed westward, right? They pushed westward to upper Euphrates and established an Aryan dynasty. So 1500 BC. Now, the so-called British Israel doctrine states that 700 BC and after, the so-called northern tribes pushed westward into the British Isles. Okay, this accredited scholar says it was 1500 years BC, which is about 700 years before that period, that time period, that these people were non-Semitic, right? That they pushed westward and established the Aryan dynasty. Interesting, right? Let's continue. It says they established an Aryan dynasty ruling the kingdom of Mitanni. Okay, that's spelled M-I-T-A-N-N-I, Mitanni, in the great westward bend of the river, where it approaches most closely to the Mediterranean, right? It was the earliest and westmost outpost of the Aryan race. See that? They formed a powerful and cultivated state which they planted thus on the road leading westward from Babylon along the Euphrates, effectively cut off the latter from her profitable western trade, and doubtless had much to do with the decline in which Babylon, under her foreign Kassite dynasty, now founded herself. Okay? He says everything thus conspired to favor the permanence of Egyptian power in Asia. Unquote. So now, for those of you who are embracing that the British Israel are Israelites, here is a man who is of your stock is telling you that the Aryans formed their own civilization 1500 BC. Okay, so you can't quite possibly, from a historical perspective, based on the information, be Israel if you went to the British Isles 1500 BC. Okay, now let's go back to Genesis 10, and we're going to read Genesis chapter 10 again. This time we're going to deal with the sons of Japheth, and we're going to do a little more in detail, and then we're going to get into the so-called African Americans and blacks. Okay, Genesis chapter 10. You want to read that for me? Genesis 10 and 2. We're going to read Genesis 10 and 2 down to 5.
The sons of Japheth, Gomer and Magog and Madai and Javan and Tubal and Meshech and Tyrus, and the sons of Gomer, Ashkenaz, Riphath and Togarmah, and the sons of Javan, Elisha, Tarshish, Kittim, and Dodanim. By these were the isles of the Gentiles divided in their lands, every one after his tongue, after their families and their nations. Okay, so now I'm going to read from another source. So that is the King James book of Genesis, or Bereshit chapter 10, verse 2 through 5. We read that, telling you that these sons, the people that according to history pushed westward, are the sons of Japheth, who was the last son of Noah, who's called the Gentiles. Right now, what I want to do is I want to go to another source and read. Okay, we're gonna come back to the book of Jubilees because I got some stuff I want to share out of that. What I want to do is I want to read out of the works of Josephus. We're gonna read some of this. I'm gonna ask my issue to read this. You got your reading eyes? Okay. Once you start right, this is
The Antiquities of, this is called the Antiquities of the Jews. We're going to start right at book 1, chapter 6. Okay, this tells you the dispersion or the settlement of the sons of Noah. Okay, go ahead.
Now they were the grandchildren of Noah, in honor of whom names were imposed on the nations by those that first seized upon them. Japhet, the son of Noah, had 7 sons. They inhabited so that beginning at the mountain Taurus and Amanus, they proceeded along Asia as far as the river Tanais, and along Europe to Cadiz.
Where?
Cadiz. Along Europe to Cadiz.
Along Europe. This is the works of Josephus. So, what son was that went to Europe? Oh, just read that paragraph one more time, then.
Now they were the grandchildren of Noah, in honor of whom names were imposed on the nations by those that first seized upon them. Japheth, the son of Noah, had 7 sons. They inhabited so that beginning at the mountain Taurus and Amanus, they proceeded along Asia as far as the river Tanais, and along Europe to Cadiz, and setting themselves on the lands which they light upon, which none had inhabited before. They called the nations by their own names. For Gomer founded those from the Greeks, now called Galatians, or Gauls, but were then called Gomerites. Magog founded those that from him were named Magogites, but who are by the Greeks called Scythians. Now as to Javan and Madai, the sons of Japhet, from Madai came the Medians, who were called Medes by the Greeks. But from Javan, Ionia and all the Grecians are derived. Thobal founded the Thobalites, who are now called Iberis, and the Mosokinin. That's not right. Mosokini.
That's all right.
Were founded by Mosak. Now they are the Cappadocians. There is also a mark of their ancient denomination still to be shown. For there is even now among them a city called Mazaka, which may inform those that are able to understand that so was the entire nation once called. Tyrus or Thyrus also called those whom he ruled over, Thyrasians, but the Greeks changed the name to Thracians. And so many were the countries that had the children of Japhet for their inhabitants. Of the 3 sons of Gomer, Axcanax founded the Axcanaxians, who are now called by the Greeks Raginians. So did Riphath found the Riphians, now called Pathologians. And Thrugamar, the Thrugraminians, who as the Greeks resolved were the Phrygians. Of the 3 sons of Javan, also the son of Japhet, Elisha gave name to the Elysians, who were his subjects. They are now the Aeolians. Tharsis to the Tharsians, who for so was Cilicia, of old called. The sign of which is this, that the noblest city they have, and a metropolis also, is Tarsus. The Tau, being by change put for Theta, or where it says the Tau, being by change put for the Theta.
Theta.
Sethimus possessed the island Sethima. It is now called Cyprus. And from that it is that all islands and the greatest part of the sea coast are named Setham by the Hebrews, and one city there is in Cyprus that has been able to preserve its denomination. It is called Citius or Citius by those who use the language of the Greeks, and has not, by the use of the dialect, escaped the name of Setham. And so many nations have the children and grandchildren of Japheth possessed. Now, when I have premised somewhat, which perhaps the Greeks do not know, I will return and explain what I have omitted. For such names are pronounced here after the manner of the Greeks, to please my readers, for our own country language does not so pronounce them, but the names in all cases are of one and the same ending. For the name we here pronounce Noeus is there Noah, and in every case retains the same termination.
Okay, great. So now Josephus tells us that Japheth is the father of the people who settled in Europe. They're not Israelites. They're Europeans. So the scriptures, Genesis 10, agrees with the works of Josephus, the Antiquities of the Jews, in book 1, chapter 6, where it explains that the Europeans are not Shemites, which goes in conjunction with what we read from the ancient history of Egypt, that says that the Aryan people formed their own land 1,500 years before the Common Era. Okay, they're not from Shem, they're not Israelites, they're not British covenant men, none of that. That's all hogwash, it's all a false, it's all fables, right? Now, we're gonna go back to, keep your finger on that because we'll come back to that. You can put a little tab in there if you want. And we're gonna come back to, we're gonna go back to the book of Jubilees, okay? And I'm going to read and give my Isha a break because she did a lot of reading. She did some good reading there. There's a lot of funny names in that. We're going to read Book of Jubilees. This is page 69 in the Pseudepigrapha, right? In the Book of Jubilees, chapter number 7 and verse number 14. So the Book of Jubilees, chapter 7, verse 14, and it reads as follows, okay? And he, in parentheses, Ham, built a city for himself, and he named it after his wife, Na'etama Uk. It's an African name, right? And Japheth saw it and was jealous of his brother. And he also built a city for himself and named it after his wife, right? Adatanesis. And Shem dwelt with his father, Noah, and built a city near his father on the mountain. Talk about the Mount Ararat, where Iran is, okay? And he also named it after his wife, Sedek Ketelabab. And behold, these 3 cities were near Mount Lubar. Sedek Ketelabab was in front of the mountain on the east. So we're talking about where the ark rested. That's where what the world calls the Mesopotamia, what the Bible calls Aram Naharim, which means in the Hebrew tongue, the land between the rivers, or what they call the Tigris rivers, the land between the rivers. Okay, the land of Aram, Aram Naharim, the land of Aram between the rivers, Naharim. Okay, all right. So that's where Noah's son Shem built the city, right? That's where the general civilization began, right there. Not in Egypt, but in the Mesopotamia, or Aram, how you say it? Aram Ha-Narim. Okay, all right. I think I did it right. If I didn't, just forget me, all right? Now, it says, and behold, these 3 cities were near Mount Lubar. Okay. So now it says, and Nut Ektama Uk, that's Ham's wife, was facing south, right? Facing south. So if you go south of where the ark settled, you would end up in Iraq, or what the world calls Babylon, right? Because the scriptures, which we'll read that, tells you that Ham had a son named Cush, and Cush begot Nimrod, and Nimrod's kingdom was Babylon, right? That's where our father Abraham came from, in the region of Babylon, which is the south, which is where the sons of Ham went, right? South. Okay, you follow me now? Before Ham went west into Africa, they went south around the Mesopotamian, or the land between the rivers. Okay, now, then the last part says here, and Adonijah was towards the west. Okay, Adonijah was Japheth's wife, the city that Japheth built, and he went towards the west. So if you go west from where the ark settled, you go in the direction of Europe, that we call the land that we call Europe today. Okay, that's where Japheth went and settled. So now we've given you 3 sources proving to you that the sons of Japheth are not Israelites.